He looked calm, polished, almost too perfect, as he stepped into one of the most scrutinized families on earth. While the royal world was falling apart, he quietly won the heart of a princess. But nothing about his story is clean. Behind the image is a shocking past. An innocent child caught in the middle, and a secret behavior Edoardo has been hiding. Now it's starting to surface. And what it reveals about the man Beatrice married is deeply disturbing. The ex-fiancé and the son named Wolfie. Before Princess Beatrice, Edoardo was already building a family with another woman, Dara Huang. Dara was not some casual girlfriend he dated for a few months. She was Harvard-educated, an internationally successful architect who would later build her own design firm entirely from scratch. She was accomplished, brilliant, and by every account, deeply committed to the life she and Edoardo were building together. They were engaged and planning a future together. But even inside that life, something was already breaking. Something happened that should have brought them closer. It didn't. Dara fell pregnant. Somehow it felt wrong, almost like a curse. Several people close to them suggested there was already tension forming during that period that no one outside could see. Some claim they went weeks without saying as little as hi to each other. That means she may have carried that child while everything around her was quietly falling apart. Dara knew that bringing a child into a situation like that means one thing. If it falls apart, she would be the one to carry everything. So she fought. She really did. And then one night, everything snapped. It started like many arguments do. According to the reports, something was said that crossed a line. And in that moment, Dara lost all control. She told him that if he wanted to walk away, then he could. She was done begging for something that felt broken. She would raise the baby on her own. And one day that child would know exactly who stayed and who left. For the rest of that week, they say her eyes were swollen, red, not from one night, but from months of stress, fear, and exhaustion that had nowhere to go. And after that night, nothing was the same again. Still, the outside world saw none of it. In 2016, Wolfie was born. Christopher Wolf Mapelli Mozzi, a child brought into a situation that was already unstable, even if no one said it out loud. Then something even more unsettling happened. In 2017, Edoardo and Dara were still being photographed together. Public events, appearances, smiling, standing side by side like everything was fine. But behind those images, something else was happening. The reality did not match what people were being shown, because by 2018, it was over just like that. And here is another detail that makes it even more strange. Their engagement was never formally announced. And because the engagement had never been formally announced in the first place, there was nothing formal to dissolve either. It just vanished. And that silence is where things start to feel wrong. Because when something this serious collapses, people usually speak. They defend themselves. They try to control the story. Here, no one said anything. It was a complete shutdown. Then came the moment that changed how this story is seen. Within months of that breakup, Edoardo was seen with Princess Beatrice. It felt too fast. It felt like something didn't line up. When did that relationship with Beatrice actually begin? Did it start after the engagement ended, or was it already forming before things officially broke with Dara? No one has answered that. But there is one part of this story that cannot be hidden or ignored. Wolfie, he was right there in the middle of all of this. The boy became linked to the British royal family through a relationship his mother had no control over. This is the foundation of everything that follows. Because Edoardo did not enter the royal family alone, he brought a past, a broken engagement, and a child whose life had already been changed. But to understand how Edoardo became the kind of man who could walk away from one life and straight into another, you have to go back to where he started. Because the way he handled everything that came later was not accidental. It was learned, and it was learned early. And many people who have followed his story closely point to one specific year as the moment that shaped everything. 2011. What happened that year left a mark that never fully went away. The count in the making. In 2011, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi received a call that changed everything. His stepfather, Christopher Shale, was dead. Not in a quiet place, not in private. He had collapsed at Glastonbury Festival, one of the most public events in Britain. Crowds, noise, cameras everywhere. And just days before that, his name had already been dragged through the headlines because of a leaked political memo. Christopher Shale had written it himself. Brutal words about his own party. He had described local members as embarrassing, socially awkward. It spread fast across every major newspaper in Britain. So when he died, it was not just grief, it was exposure. Christopher Shale chaired David Cameron's local Conservative Association. His body was found in the backstage area this morning. And what Edoardo did next exposed a pattern that had followed his family since he was born. Edoardo was born on November 19, 1983, at the Portland Hospital in London. That hospital was known for one thing, the elite. The same hospital used by the British royal family. The same hospital where Princess Beatrice herself was born. They came into the world in the same place long before they ever met. His father, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, was not a simple figure either. He had been born in Argentina, raised in Italy, educated in England. Then he competed in the 1972 Winter Olympics for Great Britain. Not for the country he was born in, not for the country he was raised in, for Britain. That kind of identity did not stay in one place. It moved. It adapted. It belonged everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Edoardo grew up watching that. And it did not stop there. After the Olympics, Alessandro rebuilt his life completely. He became an international art dealer, a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. He changed direction and succeeded again. That pattern mattered. His mother, Nikki Williams Ellis, was building her own path at the same time. She moved through politics, charity, and design. Then she remarried. Christopher Shale became part of the family. Edoardo grew up in a blended household. A stepfather, a half-brother, two worlds under one structure. That structure would later repeat in his own life. But there is another part of his background that people often mention, but rarely explain properly. The title. Edoardo carried the title of Count of the Kingdom of Italy. It came from his family line. The title was given in 1913 by King Victor Emmanuel III to the Mapelli Mozzi family, likely as a reward for their status, loyalty, or service to the monarchy at the time, and it was passed down through generations. At first glance, it sounds impressive, but that same king, Victor Emmanuel III, later signed Italy's racial laws in 1938. These laws stripped Italian Jews of their citizenship, their jobs, their children's right to attend school, and their basic place in society. They did not stop there. Those laws opened the door directly to the deportation of thousands of Italian Jews to Nazi concentration camps, families torn apart, lives erased. And the king who set all of that in motion is the same king whose signature sits at the origin of the title Edoardo carries today. Even after Italy officially abolished royal titles in 1946, the family did not stop using it. Legally, the title no longer held any power, but they kept it anyway. That choice shows something important. It means the title was not just about law. It was about identity, status, and how they saw themselves even when the country had moved on. The same idea shows up in the family estate. The Villa Mapelli Mozzi in northern Italy is not just a large property. It is a 15th century estate that once served as a monastery, and it has stayed in the family for generations. So when Edoardo grows up connected to that estate, he is not building from the ground up. He is stepping into something that already existed long before him and is expected to continue after him. It shows that his life was shaped by a family that holds on to its history, its status, and its identity and does not let it fade. Edoardo was then educated at the Dragon School in Oxford, one of the most elite preparatory schools in Britain. After that came Radley College, then a master's degree in politics from the University of Edinburgh. Every major door had been opened for him, but none of that prepared him for what happened in 2011. Losing Christopher Shale in that way, at that moment, under that level of public attention, forced something into him early. When your family name is dragged through the media, you do not get the option to fall apart in public. You learn to show strength even when everything feels unstable. After that loss, Edoardo helped co-found a charity. He cycled overnight through London to raise money. He supported projects like building Rwanda's first grass cricket stadium. On the surface, it looked like generosity, but it was also something else. It was a way of proving that no matter what happened, he would not stop moving forward. With that background behind him, Edoardo did not step into adulthood unprepared. He stepped in ready to build something of his own, a business he called Banda. And what he built would place him in the spotlight long before Princess Beatrice ever entered the picture. The empire he built, Banda Property. People on the Gold Coast of Australia had put their money in Edoardo's business. Real money, the kind of money people save for years. They had seen the glossy images of a high-end beachfront development called the Masthead Ocean Club. Luxury living on the Australian coast backed by serious names. The press releases had been confident. The coverage had been breathless. This was an international venture with real weight behind it. And then it collapsed. The company behind the Masthead Ocean Club went into administration. The development was gone, and the people who had committed their money to it were left with nothing but the memory of those glossy images and absolute pain. Machine, built by a man who, despite later revealing he is dyslexic, channeled everything he had into the visual world of design and luxury living. But here is where the image starts to crack. Banda's entire reputation rested on that claim of finding undervalued parts of London. That was the story Edoardo told publicly and repeatedly. Then serious property journalists and writers at Forbes started asking questions when one of Banda's major projects landed in Notting Hill, one of the most expensive, most sought-after postcodes in the entire country. A place where nothing has been undervalued for decades. But there is a darker layer underneath even that. London is a city in the middle of a severe housing crisis. Thousands of people are being pushed out of neighborhoods they grew up in because prices have made it impossible to stay. When a company takes already expensive properties and makes them more expensive, real people lose their homes and their communities. That is not a side effect of Banda's business model. That is the business model. Edoardo responded to all of it the same way he responded to everything difficult in his life. He kept moving, kept building, kept showing up to conferences in well-fitted suits, talking about architecture with total confidence. While the Australian collapse left real people exposed and helpless, that habit of showing up and presenting success, regardless of what was falling apart behind the scenes, had been part of him since 2011. The question was how long it could hold, because what was coming next had nothing to do with property or business. He was about to meet someone, a woman named Beatrice. And nothing after that would ever be the same. How a count wins a princess. 51 days. That was all Beatrice got. From the moment her engagement to Edoardo was announced to the moment everything collapsed. Just 51 days of what should have been the happiest time of her life. Edoardo and Beatrice did not meet by chance. Their families had known each other for years. Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson had moved in the same circles as the Mapelli Mozzi family for a long time. Edoardo's mother said it herself when the engagement was announced. They had known Beatrice for most of her life. That makes what happened next feel even more uncomfortable. Before Edoardo ever entered the picture, Beatrice had spent nearly 10 years with a man named Dave Clark. She was 18 when it started, 28 when it ended. A full decade of her life given to a relationship that produced no proposal, no explanation when it finally collapsed. Beatrice never spoke about why. And then, within 2 years, Edoardo was there. But Edoardo was not a clean start. He had just ended his engagement to Dara in 2018. He had a young son. His past was still unresolved. And yet, by late 2018, something had already begun between them, away from cameras and press. By November 2018, it was clear they were together. Then, in March 2019, they stepped out publicly at a fundraising event at the National Portrait Gallery in London. Cameras were everywhere. And there he was, standing next to a princess. Not just any man, a property developer, a count, a man with a past people were only just beginning to understand. The reaction was instant. Who is he? By May 2019, it was no longer a question. They attended Lady Gabriella Windsor's royal wedding together. Everyone confirmed what they had been dying to know. These two were definitely up to something. Then came September 2019, and Edoardo outdid himself. He proposed. Yes, he did. Edoardo designed the ring himself, working with British jeweler Sean Lean to bring that design to life. The ring they created together featured a diamond cut in a long rectangular shape, known as a baguette cut, and set into a floral pattern on the band. But Sean is not a simple, soft choice for an engagement ring. He is known internationally for his dark, sharp, deeply unsettling work with a late Alexander McQueen. Pieces built around bones, thorns, coiled spines, and sharp metal. Jewelry that was never meant to feel soft or safe. It was designed to disturb, to unsettle, to make people uncomfortable the moment they looked at it. That was the world Sean Lean built his name inside. One of his most recognized pieces was worn by Isabella Blow, the iconic British fashion editor, who died by suicide in 2007. The man Edoardo chose to craft the ring for the happiest moment of Beatrice's life had built his entire career inside a world defined by beauty and tragedy in equal measure. On September 26, 2019, Buckingham Palace made it official. Princess Beatrice of York was engaged to Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi. Their statement was simple, clean, almost too clean, carefully written words about starting a life together. Nothing real enough to match what we now know was sitting underneath. And there was a reason for that control that the public did not yet know about, because not everyone inside the royal family was celebrating. In 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice released a new set of documents connected to the Jeffrey Epstein case. Breaking tonight, the Justice Department releasing more than 3 million pages of documents related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And Beatrice's name was in them, not as an accused person, but her name was there, connected to a phone call that took place in 2011. A call involving her mother, Sarah Ferguson, and a man named Jody Gorange. Sarah Ferguson is not just Beatrice's mother. She is a woman who has spent years at the center of her own serious controversies, financial scandals, questions about her judgment, and her own unresolved proximity to the Epstein world through Andrew. Yet more damaging allegations about the former Prince Andrew and his relationship with convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Jody Gorange was not a standard journalist. He was someone Ferguson used to plant favorable stories about herself in the press. The phone call was reportedly connected to something specific. Sarah Ferguson was attempting to solicit £500,000 from a contact with ties to Epstein. Gorange was acting as the go-between, and Beatrice was present during that call. She was 23 years old. What she knew about the full nature of that conversation has never been addressed publicly. What she understood about who those contacts were and where that money was coming from has never been explained. Those questions have simply never been asked out loud in any sustained way. But the documents asked them, and the world noticed. Now, here is what Edoardo was doing while all of this was unfolding. He attended a private lunch at Cornice, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Belgravia. Photos appeared on social media showing him at what looked like an industry networking event. Relaxed, present, completely undisturbed. People were furious that his wife's name had just surfaced in federal documents connected to a trafficking investigation, and he was at lunch. He has never made a single public statement about any of it. Not about Andrew, not about the documents, not about Beatrice's name appearing in them. Complete silence, sustained and unbroken. That silence protects him. It protects his image, everything he had ever worked hard for. That is the detail that sits uncomfortably at the center of everything. And that is where the critics come in. Because over time, people started to notice something they could not ignore. At first, it looked like control, composure, a man staying calm while everything around him burned. But the pattern kept repeating. Situation after situation, the same response. And that is when people began to call it what it really is. A pattern of self-protection. A man who never steps forward, never takes the hit, never puts himself between his family and the fire. Instead, he stays untouched while the people around him absorb the damage. That is the behavior he kept hidden. Not because it was invisible, but because it took time for people to connect the dots. Now they have, and it changes everything. Because the real question is no longer about what has happened. It is about what will happen next. When a moment comes that his family truly needs him to speak, to stand, to risk something for them, will he? Or will the silence hold again? He has built success. He has built access. He has built a life that works. But silence, no matter how controlled, protects one person first. And after everything, one thing remains deeply unsettling. A man this visible, this close to power, and still no one can clearly say what he truly stands for. That is not accidental. That is a choice.